The day he left, he said I was too ambitious, too focused, too cold, too married to my work to make room for him. He packed his bags on a Wednesday evening, folded his clothes like he was leaving a hotel room. No screaming, no plates thrown, just a quiet exit that felt more like a resignation letter than a breakup. He even said thank you, like I had been a service he was canceling. And she was waiting outside. I saw her from the window. Cream blazer, bright smile, the kind of woman who makes men feel like the main character in their own story. She was everything I appeared not to be in that moment. Warm, soft, available. I watched him load his bags into her car. I watched her laugh at something he said. I watched them disappear around the corner. Then I turned around, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. Not because I wasn't breaking, because I already knew something neither of them could see. I knew what I was building, and I knew, with a quiet that felt almost dangerous, that this was not the end of my story. It was just the end of his chapter in it. Let me take you back 2 years before that Wednesday. I was 27, junior strategist at a firm called Aldrin & Cross. Mid-size, respectable enough to put on a resume, invisible enough that nobody noticed how hard I was actually working. I was the kind of woman who stayed 3 hours after everyone left, not because someone asked me to, because I could see things in the numbers that others missed, and I was not going to leave until I understood exactly what I was looking at. My colleagues thought I was intense, my manager thought I was useful, and Marcus thought I was fascinating. At first. Marcus Webb, business development. The kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they had been waiting for him. He was electric in meetings, dangerous at negotiating tables, and completely disarming in person. He sold things, ideas, visions, himself. He was exceptional at it. We made sense on paper. He brought the rooms, I built what filled them. He opened doors. I made sure there was something worth walking into. For 1.5 years, that felt like partnership, like balance, like love. What I didn't understand then was that Marcus didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience, and I was too busy building to applaud. His name was on every deal I engineered behind the scenes. When clients praised the precision of our proposals, he accepted it smoothly, graciously, naturally. I told myself that was fine, that I was playing a long game, that credit was temporary but skill was permanent. I told myself a lot of things to keep the peace. And meanwhile, she made him feel seen. Sophia Andrade. She ran the client experience division. She was sharp, socially gifted, and genuinely kind in ways that I had let myself forget to be while I was busy surviving. She remembered names, she followed up, she made people feel like they mattered the moment they walked through the door. The clients loved her, the staff loved her, Marcus loved her. I found out the way you always find out, not from him, not from anyone who respected me enough to say it to my face. I found out from the look on his face when her name came up at dinner. A flicker, half a second. But I was trained to catch patterns, and that was a pattern I recognized immediately. He left 6 weeks later, and Sophia Andrade became the woman waiting outside in the cream blazer. Here is what nobody tells you about being the woman who got left for someone warmer, someone easier, someone who laughs more and works less. They expect you to fall apart. They check on you the first week. They bring wine. They say the things people say. They tell you that you are better off, that he never deserved you, that someone else is coming. And then they go home and quietly assume that you are sitting in your apartment, staring at his side of the closet, wondering what you did wrong. They are waiting for the collapse. I did not collapse. I recalibrated. I gave myself 3 days. 3 days to feel every inch of it. I cried on day 1. Not for Marcus specifically, but for the version of the future I had half imagined with him in it. I was angry on day 2. Not at Sophia. She owed me nothing. I was angry at myself for letting comfort become complacency, for allowing warmth to become a substitute for forward motion. Day 3, I was quiet. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, and I wrote down every single thing I had been postponing, every idea I had shelved, every risk I had softened, every ambition I had quietly trimmed to fit inside the shape of a relationship that was already shrinking me. I wrote for 4 hours. What came out was not a to-do list. It was a blueprint. I was not going to chase what I had lost. I was going to build what I had been too distracted to finish. And I was going to do it with a focus that made everything I had done before look like a warm-up. I went back to work that Monday with something different in my chest. Not grief, not anger, something colder and cleaner than either. Clarity. The next 24 months, I disappeared. Not literally. I showed up every day. I sat in every meeting. I delivered every report. But socially, relationally, optically, I vanished. I stopped going to the Friday drinks. I stopped worrying about who was watching. I stopped performing progress and started actually making it. I came in early. I stayed late. I studied the parts of the business that nobody else wanted to understand because they were complicated and unsexy and required a kind of patience that most people substituted with politics. I learned the operations side, not the glossy strategy layer, the actual machinery, supply chains, vendor contracts, the cost centers that nobody touched because they had been running the same way for a decade, and questioning them made people uncomfortable. I got into the numbers so deep that the CFO, a 60-year-old man named Gerald who had worked there for 20 years, started sending me things he didn't fully understand himself and asking me what I thought. That was the first signal. At the same time, I started building outside the company. I took every certification that mattered. I joined industry boards. I attended the conferences that real decision-makers attended, not the ones that looked good on an event calendar. I introduced myself to people who operated 3 levels above where I was sitting. Not desperately, not with an agenda they could smell. I asked good questions and I listened, and I remembered every single thing they said. I built a network the way I built everything else, methodically, patiently, brick by brick in the dark. And the whole time, Marcus and Sophia were living their warm, easy, photographable life. I know because I heard things, the way you always hear things in a world that is smaller than it looks. They had moved in together by month 3, vacations by month 6, engagement whispers by the end of the first year. People in the office talked about them the way people talk about a couple they find reassuring, like proof that things work out. Nobody talked about me that way. Nobody was watching me at all, which was exactly what I needed. 22 months after the Wednesday he left, I got a call from a woman named Claire Sutton. Claire ran a boutique executive search firm that placed senior leadership at companies undergoing serious structural change. She had been watching me, she said. Not just my work at Aldrin and Cross, though that had caught her attention. She had seen me speak at a sector conference 8 months earlier. She had spoken to 2 board members who had mentioned my name independently. She had done her homework. She had a client, she told me, a company called Marin Group, mid-size firm, significant market position, underperforming in operations and client strategy. The board had forced out the previous CEO after 2 consecutive years of margin erosion. They wanted a rebuild, not a caretaker, not someone to steady the ship while they looked for a savior. They wanted someone who could walk in and restructure from the inside out, someone who understood the numbers and the people, someone patient enough to do it right and strong enough to do it fast. She said she thought that person was me. I let her finish. I asked exactly 4 questions. Then I told her I was interested and I would send my materials by the end of the week. I hung up. I sat very still for about 90 seconds. Then I opened my laptop and started preparing. The process took 11 weeks, 4 rounds of interviews, 2 board presentations, a full operational audit that I completed in 10 days when they gave me 3 weeks, financial modeling, culture diagnostics, a phased restructuring plan with 18-month benchmarks and a 5-year vision attached. I was not the only candidate. Claire told me there were 3 others, all older, all male, all with titles that looked more impressive on the surface than mine. 2 of them had led companies before. 1 had a profile in a business magazine that quarter. I was not intimidated. I was specific. Where they spoke in broad strokes, I spoke in details. Where they pitched vision, I brought proof. I knew every number in that company's last 6 annual reports. I knew where the inefficiencies were hiding. I knew which client relationships had deteriorated and why. I knew the 3 vendor contracts that were bleeding margin every single quarter. I had done work during that audit that their own internal team had never done. The board noticed. In my final presentation, the chairman leaned forward about halfway through and stopped writing. He just watched me. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment, in that particular way rooms go quiet when something real has just been said in them. He asked me one question. He said, "What do you want to do first?" I told him, specifically, with timelines. 3 days later, Claire called. I had the job. I will tell you what I knew before I walked through those doors. I knew that Sofia Andrade worked at Marin Group. She had moved there 11 months earlier. Client Experience Director. The same function she had built her reputation on at Aldrin and Cross. She was good at it. I want to be clear about that. Her numbers were solid. Her team liked her. The clients she managed had not left during the company's rough years, which was meaningful. She was a legitimate professional. She was also the woman who had driven away with my ex-boyfriend while I stood at a window. I want to tell you what I did not do. I did not plan anything against her. I did not engineer her placement in my path. I did not take the job to humiliate her or prove a point to Marcus or make anyone suffer. Those things would have required me to make her the center of a story that was never about her. This story was always about me. What I did was this. I found out who worked in the leadership layer of the company I was about to run. I reviewed every person's file. Her file was in the stack. Her name registered. I felt something. I would be lying if I said I felt nothing. But it was brief, almost impersonal, like seeing a place name on a map that you had once visited. I moved on to the next file. And on Monday morning, I put on my black coat, picked up my bag, and walked through the front doors of Marin Group as its new chief executive officer. They had arranged a company-wide meeting for 9 in the morning. The conference room held maybe 40 people, with another 60 watching on a screen feed from their desks. I walked to the front without stopping to make small talk, not from arrogance, because I knew that the first 2 minutes of how a room experiences you are the 2 minutes they remember longest. I thanked them for being there. I told them what I was not going to do. I was not going to stand in front of them with a slide deck full of corporate language and buzzwords. I was not going to promise transformation and deliver a reorganization that made executives feel better while making everyone else feel worse. I told them what I was going to do. I was going to spend my first 30 days listening. To every division head, to frontline team members, to the people who actually touched the work every day. I told them that the people closest to a problem usually understand it better than the people farthest from it, and I intended to close that distance. I could feel the room shifting. Not dramatically, subtly. The particular way a room shifts when skepticism begins to wear away. And somewhere in the middle of those faces, I could see Sofia Andrade. She was seated in the second row, professional, composed, looking at me the way everyone in that room was looking at me, trying to figure out who I was. She didn't recognize me. I knew she would eventually. Someone would say something. She would remember. The moment would come. I was not afraid of that moment, because I had done nothing to be afraid of. I will compress the next 4 months because the details are less important than the result. I restructured 3 departments. I renegotiated 2 of the vendor contracts I had identified during the audit, recovering margin that translated into real numbers on the quarterly report. I cut one program that had been protected for years because of its history, not its performance. That decision was not popular. I made it anyway. I built a direct communication rhythm with frontline staff that bypassed 2 layers of management, not to undermine anyone, because information was dying in the middle and I needed it to move. The results started showing in month 3. And Sophia? She was good at her job. Consistently good. Her division had the highest client retention in the company. Her team had the highest internal satisfaction scores. When I sat down with her for her 30-day review, because I reviewed every division head individually, I told her exactly that. No detours, no coldness, no performance of distance. She sat across from me and said, "I know who you are." I said, "I know." She said, "I want you to know that I stopped her, not harshly, firmly. I said, "I didn't take this job because of anything related to our personal history. And I'm not evaluating your work based on it either. Your numbers are good. Your team trusts you. I expect that to continue." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, and we never spoke of it again. He reached out at the 5-month mark. I had expected it earlier, honestly. The news of my appointment had run in 3 trade publications. My name was in conversations. People talk, and the world is small. He sent a message through LinkedIn, professional in tone, congratulatory, saying he had always known I would get somewhere significant and that he was not surprised. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings. He said, genuinely, that he was proud of me. I read it twice, and I noticed what I felt, which was almost nothing. Not numbness, not suppression, actual, honest, quiet nothing. The kind of nothing that tells you that something has fully healed. He was a man I had once loved who had made a choice and moved on. I had made a different choice and moved further. I did not reply. Not out of cruelty, because there was nothing to say that the silence didn't already say better. Some things don't need a response. They just need to be outgrown. By the end of my first full fiscal year, Marin Group had reversed its margin decline. The board extended my contract by 3 years in a meeting that lasted 11 minutes because there was very little to debate. A profile ran in a business publication, one of the real ones, not a puff piece, and the journalist asked me what the turning point in my career had been. I thought about it seriously, and I said, the moment I stopped building for an audience and started building for an outcome. She asked me what I meant. I said, for a long time, I was doing excellent work in hopes that the right people would notice, and some of that is necessary. But the real shift happened when I let go of the watching, when I went underground and built without checking whether anyone was paying attention. That's when the work became real. That's when I became real. She wrote it down. She asked if there was a personal experience that catalyzed it. I smiled. I said yes. I did not say more than that. In my second year, I promoted Sophia Andrade. Not as a gesture, not as some theatrical act of magnanimity, because she had earned it. Her division had grown, she had built something genuinely strong, and when I looked at my senior leadership team and assessed who had the range to move into a broader role, her name was on the list, based entirely on merit. I called her into my office and told her I was offering her the role of Chief Client Officer. She went still for a moment. Then she said, "Why?" I said, "Because you're the best person for it." That's the only reason I make this kind of decision. She asked me, quietly, whether it was strange for me. I told her the truth. I said, "It was strange once. It isn't anymore. What I'm offering you is a role you've earned. What you do with it is about you, not about anything that happened between people who used to know each other." She accepted, and she was excellent in that role, exactly as I expected her to be. I have told this story to one person before writing it down, a younger woman who worked in my firm, 25 years old, who came to me after a similar kind of personal fracture. Her long-term partner had left her for a colleague. She was devastated in the specific way that mixes grief with humiliation. She felt replaced. She felt like the loss said something permanent about her value. She asked me how I had moved on. I told her, I did not move on. I moved forward. Those are not the same thing. Moving on suggests leaving something behind, putting it in a drawer, pretending it didn't happen. I did not do that. I let it mean what it meant. I let it land fully. And then I asked myself the most important question a person can ask after a significant loss. What does this make possible? Not what did this take from me? Not who did this to me? Not how do I make them regret it? What does this make possible? Because here is the thing about being left. It clears the schedule. The hours you were spending maintaining a relationship that was quietly diminishing you, those hours come back. The mental bandwidth you were using to manage someone else's comfort, that bandwidth comes back. The edges of yourself you had softened so that someone else could feel unthreatened, those edges come back. You get yourself back. And if you are deliberate, if you are disciplined, if you are willing to disappear for a season and do the work that nobody is watching you do, you get more than yourself back. You get the version of yourself you would never have found if the easier path had stayed open. The story people want this to be is a revenge story, and I understand why. It has the shape of one. Woman gets left, woman rises, woman walks into a position of power over the life of the woman who replaced her. It is a clean narrative, satisfying, cinematic. But revenge would have required me to make Marcus and Sophia the point of the whole thing. And they were never the point. I was. The most dangerous misunderstanding a woman can carry after a loss like that is the idea that her rise is about someone else's fall. That the measure of her success is what it costs the people who underestimated her. That the arrival matters because of who has to watch it. If that is your motivation, you will peak at the moment of arrival. You will walk into that room thinking about their faces, and you will miss the room entirely. I walked into that company thinking about the work. That is the difference. I did not become Sophia's boss to make her feel small. I became her boss because I had built something real, and real things eventually take up the space they deserve. And when the time came, I promoted her, because she had built something real too. That is what actual power looks like. Not using what you have to diminish, using what you have to demand excellence, from yourself first, then from everyone around you. Marcus left because he thought my ambition made me less. He was reading the wrong story. My ambition was never the wall between us. It was the foundation beneath everything I was becoming. He just never stayed long enough to see what I was building on top of it. And that, more than anything else, was his loss, not mine. Be quiet. Build. Let the work speak when you finally walk in the room. Because one day, you will walk into a room that was never supposed to have your name on the door. And it will.